In 2007, digital cameras were still figuring themselves out. Companies were experimenting with different technologies and form factors and trying ideas in ways that would probably not make it past product meeting today. And before the X100 series and the X mount and the TikTok hype, Fujifilm was one of those companies. Back then, the corporation was still trying to adapt to the beginning of the digital era and was building a line of DSLRs that probably only true photo nerds remember today. The last of that product line was the Fujifilm S5 Pro, a strange and expensive Frankenstein's monster of a camera that went through the test of time and can already be considered a classic. And nowadays, when every new camera seems to launch with quite a bit of drama and all the hype and pre-orders and pricing debates, this old Fuji might be surprisingly refreshing. At the beginning of 2000, Fujifilm entered the digital SLR market in a kind of a weird way. The company decided to not spend time on the body design and used Nikon's camera bodies instead. The first Fujifilm S-series cameras were based on Nikon film shells like f60 and f80, and the S5 Pro has the same body as Nikon's also legendary D200. And for me, the best outcome of this collaboration is that this Fujifilm uses Nikon's F-mount, so you get an amazing selection of lenses, including vintage ones. In general, this strategy of sharing resources is not really unique. For example, Panasonic and Leica often launch the same cameras under two different brands with exactly the same specs. However, Fuji S5 Pro is a completely different camera inside compared to Nikon D200. It has a unique Super CCD sensor which effectively has just 6 megapixels compared to Nikon's 10 megapixel sensor. And this sensor has an interesting design that uses different photoreceptors for shadows and highlights, which supposedly should expand dynamic range, but in reality I didn't notice much of a difference compared to Nikon. You do notice the difference in color science and tonality though, and the S5 Pro has rather pleasant colors straight out of camera. Also, because the S5 Pro is based on the Nikon D200 body, it has the same weather sealing, so I had no trouble using it in the rain with Nikon's 35mm f1.8 lens. It even has some film simulations, which Fujifilm is famous for today. Of course, the implementation is very different from the modern cameras. You only have 3 or 4 options with some customization, but they're still nice to have for some situations. I do still prefer RAW files though, and here they are really nice. The only possible issue though is that because of the unique sensor design, different editing software will treat the files completely differently. Lightroom works just fine, and I also tried using Fuji's horrible RAW file converter. It did open more room for editing, but the slow and clunky interface is just not worth it. I also noticed that pictures look a bit weird when using some of Nikon's vintage lenses. They just don't render as nicely as they do on D200. Now that so many years have passed since the launch of the Fujifilm S5 Pro, and it's been 18 years now, it is somewhat interesting to reflect a bit on how the industry has changed over these years. When this camera launched in 2007, it was priced at $2,000, which would be 3100 USD in today's money. And all this for a 6 megapixel camera with no video capabilities. It had a very specific user base of wedding and portrait photographers, and this audience just really valued certain features like smooth skin tones. There seems to have been no outrage about this camera when it launched. It did not go viral, but it aged quite well until today, mostly thanks to its uniqueness, solid image quality and great ergonomics. And now if we look at how the internet reacts to modern camera launches, all the responses are just so polarized. I feel like if Fujifilm launched the $3,100 APS-C camera today, it would need to have a 100 megapixel sensor, IBIS, weather sealing, shoot 8K, open gate, be pocketable, and there would still be a lot of people expressing their discontent. I know some of it is just the effect of the internet, but I still think that when it comes to cameras, we should try to have some perspective, acknowledge that not every camera is for everyone, and appreciate for a moment that most cameras today are much more versatile and accessible than they were just several years ago. Now, when it comes to pure image quality, pretty much any camera produced in the last 5 or 10 years would yield great and somewhat similar results. In the end, most cameras today use the same sensors produced just by a couple of manufacturers. And in this current situation, you might find weird cameras like this Fujifilm S5 Pro surprisingly refreshing. Fujifilm tried a different and rather unique technology with this one, which today leads to rather interestingly looking pictures, but it is also nice to use ergonomically. It has great colors, and you can experiment with many different lenses, most of which are really affordable. Like most older cameras, it also teaches you some patience and appreciation of the process, which is useful for photography, but also for many other aspects of life. And this is why I think everyone should at least try one of these cameras. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.